Over IRS Form 8850, which is the pre-screening notice and certification request for the work opportunity credit. So, according to the Internal Revenue Code, employers are eligible for what is known as the work opportunity credit when they hire certain people that have historically faced significant barriers to employment. So if you think of people that generally have more difficulty than the average taxpayer in getting a job, that might include veterans with disabilities, convicted felons, people that live in certain, impoverished areas, people that are on unemployment benefits or supplemental security insurance, SSI. So certain people, the federal government has created through the Internal Revenue Code what's known as the work opportunity credit, where employers who take the necessary steps to hire certain people with one of these backgrounds will receive a tax credit for hiring them at an appropriate wage. So all of that stuff is done on a completely different form. But if you're the person that's being asked to complete some of the paperwork on your hiring, you might be asked to complete IRS Form 8850. And this is the pre-screening notice that you would be completing and then giving to your employer. So, or your prospective employer when you're applying for your job. So the purpose of this video is to kind of walk step by step through this form so you kind of understand a little bit better about what this form does, what you're supposed to complete, and then what happens to the form when you give it back to your prospective employer. So we cover all of this in a little bit more detail in the article, and we'll put the link to our article in the show notes. We'll also put links to any other resources we've created on forms that are related to this. So this is a 2-page tax form. On the front page is the part that if you're a job applicant, you would be completing page 1, and then your employer or prospective employer completes page 2. So we'll go through this just so that you can get a better understanding. After all, if you're applying for a job, this is paperwork that requires some secure information on your part, and it's probably important for you to know what happens with this information once you submit the form. So at the very top, you'll see the job applicant's information. We've completed it for our hero, John Doe. John Doe, his social security number. Again, you got to put your entire social security number because that's how your employer would be able to claim the tax credit for hiring you in the first place. The street address, city, state, and zip code. If you live in what's known as an empowerment zone, and the IRS has a definition of what that means, but if you think of places that are generally either very rural or inner city where there's not a whole lot of economic development, those would be considered empowerment zones. So, one of the keys here is, in fact, your zip code and your address, and that would be something that could be checked to make sure that you actually live in one of those zones. So county, phone number. If you're under the age of 40, you would put in your date of birth. There are certain categories here where you have to be under the age of 40 for your employer to be eligible. And then there's a series of check boxes. So you can check one or more of these, but let's just go through each of them to kind of verbalize and make sure you understand it. So box 1 is the box that you would check if you received a conditional certification from a workforce agency. So it could be your state level workforce agency. It could be a local agency that you went through, like a city or a county agency. And if they kind of walk you through this, then you would check box 1. Box 2 is kind of a catch-all. I'll come back to that just because there's a lot of stuff there. So box 3 is boxes 3, 4, and 5, um, you're probably going to check one of these, but maybe not all of them. So if you're a veteran, if you're not a veteran, you're not going to check box 3, 4, or 5. But if you're a veteran, take a look at each of these just to make sure you're checking the right box or boxes. So box 3 is for people if you were unemployed for one or more periods of at least 6 months during the past year. So you could check that. You could also check box 4 if you are entitled to VA compensation for a service-connected disability, and you were discharged or released from active duty within the past year. So it is possible that you could be in box 3 and box 4, but generally speaking, if you meet both of those criteria, you would be checking box 5 instead. And this is for veterans who are entitled to VA disability compensation and were unemployed for at least 6 months during the past year. So just kind of keep that in mind. Box 6 is for certain people who are members of a family that received what's known as TANF payments. Those would be the acronym is assistance for needy families. So it's not quite food stamps, but it's a different program. So if your family has received those for at least the past 18 months, or you maxed out at some point during the past 2 years, then you would check box 6. If you were unemployed for at least 27 weeks and for any period of that time, some or all of it, if you received any unemployment compensation, you can check box 7. So that's basically 6 months plus a week of unemployment, and during part or all of that time, you received unemployment compensation. So let's go back to box 2 because there's a big catch-all. But most of these have to do with either temporary assistance. So that's it. Temporary assistance for needy families. That's the TANF. Or SNAP benefits, also known as food stamps. So if you were referred by a rehab agency, either through the state, through an employment network, or through the VA, the Veterans Affairs Department, if you are a family member that received food stamps either for the past 6 months or for at least 3 out of the past 5 months, but you're no longer eligible, if you were convicted of a felony recently or released from prison, if you received SSI, or if you were a veteran and you've been unemployed for any period between 4 weeks and 6 months during the past year, you would check this box. So, and then at the bottom of the form, you would sign that and then give that back to your prospective employer. So that's what you would do as a prospective employee. Let's take a look at what happens with this form once it gets to your employer. So let's say you turn this in and you give this to your employer. We're going to just fill in the employer's information. There's usually going to be a contact, point of contact, probably from the HR department or their admin department. If there's a different phone number, they'll put a different phone number there. We'll assume that it's the same address, so we're not going to put that twice. So they'll check if you applied and you were either a member of group 4 or 6, then they would put either that group number there. That's kind of a code to, for further development when the unemployment office or ultimately receives this. So box 4 is the veteran who's entitled to VA service-connected disability and was recently discharged. And then box 6 would be people that fall into the window of the temporary assistance for needy families. So and then they'll document when you gave them the information. So this could look like when they made you the job offer, when you actually accepted, which is the hiring date, and then the date that you started the job. So it might look something like this. Now, this doesn't get filed with the IRS. It actually goes to the appropriate workforce agency. They will contact, and then once it's in the government's hands, then the paperwork gets routed throughout the government. So your employer really will only do whatever is required to qualify for the tax credit that's associated with hiring you. After that point, it then gets routed to the workforce agency. It can go to the IRS. It can go to the Department of Labor, for audit purposes. So, any other kind of routing of your personally identifiable information is auditable in that it belongs or it goes to a government agency that is held responsible for safeguarding your information. So if I were an applicant and asked to file IRS Form 8850, that's kind of the information I would want to know. So your employer will probably know a little bit of information about where they send your form. Beyond that, you would probably have to track down, whoever they reported this form to, your state employment office or whatever, to figure out where else it might have gone. So that's just my personal opinion. Like if I was filling out this form, I would want to know this information. But, your employer will most likely only do whatever is required to qualify for a tax credit. So and this is just one piece of a lot of paperwork that you'll probably be asked to file or complete when you're onboarding. So, your W-9 for tax withholding purposes, direct deposit information. There's always going to be a big stack of paperwork that new hires receive. This just happens to be a form that gets slipped in there. So if you're curious and in understanding more about this, you can always refer to our article. So speaking of articles, you can check out this article at teachmepersonalfinance.com. If you type in IRS Form 8850 in the search bar, this article will appear. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, comments, or any ideas for an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.